Growing up, Eliza, my name, was clearly different from my twin sister Amelia's. She was the golden kid, gliding in our parents' admiration, while Mom was the traditional housewife, fixated on keeping a picture-perfect family. Dad, a strict university professor, lived and breathed academics. Sadly, that picture omitted a daughter who favored band shirts and privacy. Mom's persistent mantra, frequently thrown my way as I sat at the breakfast table, headphones on, desperately trying to shut out the world, was, "Eliza, why can't you be more like your sister?" Amelia, of course, always had the ideal response. "I just don't get why it's so hard for you to put on a nice dress and smile more." It felt like we were from different worlds. Her perfectly combed hair flicked. One especially bad Saturday as we got ready for one of Dad's required faculty parties, a terrible snooze fest. I chose to rebel. Which weapon of choice do I use? Mom spotted me on the stairs, staring at my shoes as though they were covered in muck, dark eyeliner, and a pair of boots, screaming, "Inappropriate. You are not going out like that, are you?" I grumbled. "Don't see why not." Call for the dramatic sigh that captures my position as the main disappointment to the family. "Please, Eliza, simply this once. Can't you try to fit in?" "What for?" I shot back. "So you can pretend we're the perfect family?" She said, "It's about showing respect for your father, not about pretending." Amelia automatically chimed in, her heels clicking on the hardwood like a judge walking to the bench. "Mom's right, Liz. It's not that hard to look decent. Why do you always have to make things difficult?" My face ablaze. "Maybe I don't want to be a clone of you, Amelia," I said. I detested these debates, the analogies, the sense of alienation in my own house. Dad emerged, his brow wrinkled, and his words devoid of space for debate. He said, "Eliza, go change. Now. We're leaving in 10 minutes. He didn't yell. The displeasure in his eyes was sufficient to drive me back to my room to switch my boots for plain flats and wipe away half my eyeliner. Except for the classical music Dad insisted on for its calming effect, the car was silent as we traveled to the party. I promised myself as I gazed out the window, someday I would live a life in which nobody could control my wardrobe, behavior, or identity. I would be free eventually. My room served as my haven, the only place I could really be myself in the house. Unlike the rest of the home, where my parents' well-chosen decor abounds, my room was mine. 4 walls festively covered in music posters and doodles. It was my haven from my family's oppressive expectations. Dad knocked and marched in one evening as I was finding myself in a playlist of my preferred musicians, his face set in a familiar frown. "Eliza, turn that noise down. And why haven't you been studying with Amelia today? You know you both have tests coming up." Pulling one earpiece, I tried to maintain a level voice. "I have been studying, not with Amelia. I learn better on my own." Dad shook his head, obviously unconvinced. "Your sister gets good grades, and you should be doing the same. I don't see why you always have to make things difficult." "It's not about making things difficult," I remarked, mounting irritation. "I just find it strange why I have to follow Amelia's way of doing everything. Can't I have my own way of studying?" He turned away my inquiry and changed his complaint. "And those friends of yours? I saw you with them at the cafe yesterday. I don't think they're a good influence. You should be spending time with the daughters of my colleagues. They're more suited." My irritation building. "Suitable for what?" I shot back. "For you? Because they pretend to enjoy those dull university gatherings and speak of economics?" Mom showed up at the doorway, her voice shrill before he could respond. "Eliza, your father is right. Those girls are from good households. They know how to behave. They're the kind of friends you should want. Rising to meet them both was me. What if I want to choose my own friends? Choose what I study? Or even what I want to be? Friends selected for me? That's enough, Eliza," Mom murmured, her voice low. "You know your future is with the university. Your father has made sure of that. And after you graduate, you'll need to start thinking about settling down. We've already discussed this." Settling down. The words floated like a life sentence. "Is that all you mean I'm destined for? You mean start thinking about being someone's wife, like Amelia?" Mom's voice stayed strong, even if her face softened just a little. "We want what's best for you. Following the road we have defined will give you a good life." "A good life," I said often, the irony sour in my lips. "Is it a good life if it's someone else's idea of good?" Nobody responded. They were not required, of course. We all understood that debating had no value. Like Amelia, they had their ideas and wanted me to fit in. Though always together, Amelia and I were two sides of the same coin, never exactly in line. The disparities between us became even more clear at the university Dad taught at. Her passion was business management. She was the golden child, constantly nodding in lectures and posing the correct questions. Me personally, I stayed in the same program, but it felt like wearing a shoe on the wrong foot. Awkward, uncomfortable, and just plain wrong. Amelia swooped in one afternoon as I was slinking through a mound of volumes in the library, her notes neat, and her grin radiating that easy beauty. Her tone was light, but the underlying urge was clear. "Hey Liz, you coming to the study group tonight? Professor Hall mentioned he's dropping by. Could be good for us to show face." I looked up, feeling her expectations weigh on me. "No, I don't think so. You know those things aren't really my scene." She wrinkled and set her books down with a thud that mirrored her contempt. "It's not about it being your scene, Liz. You need to start taking this seriously. We are graduating soon." I shook my head and turned back to study. "I am treating it seriously, just not in a way that makes me miserable. Why bother pretending?" She groaned. "Because, Liz," she said, "sometimes you have to play the game to get ahead. You think I like all of this?" She gestured about at her precisely tabbed textbooks and color-coded notes. "It's about doing what's necessary, not about liking it." I shook my head and scraped back my chair. "Well, maybe I'm tired of doing what's needed according to everyone else. Did you ever think of that?" Her eyes were steel, but her voice softened. "Liz, Dad's not going to be around to sort things out forever. What are you going to do if you keep alienating everyone?" Feeling a flash of rebellion. Maybe I'll figure it out on my own. Maybe I don't need to follow Dad's roadmap, or yours. I shot back. Amelia sighed. Her annoyance was obvious. "You're so stubborn. Just try. For me, if not for yourself, show up tonight and talk to Professor Hall. It won't kill you." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not only my annoyingly perfect sister, but someone who truly cared in her own unique manner. I said, "Fine," not eager to promise more. "I'll ponder it," she murmured. "Thank you," her smile coming back. "It's not that bad, you know. If you gave it a chance, you might even like it." "Doubt it," I said, although I knew I lost this round. For Amelia, I would show there, sit through another dull conversation, and nod at appropriate moments. I reminded myself it was just a few hours. How horrible could it possibly be? As it happened, not as horrible as I had assumed. When Professor Hall was not speaking from a podium, he was shockingly fascinating. I even posed a question, which Amelia gave a startled but delighted glance. She poked me later as we returned to our dorm. "See? Not so terrible, right?" That brittle calm did not endure long either. Amelia brought us to her fiancé, a lawyer 10 years her senior, who already lived exactly what our parents dreamed of, and was already well established. Praising Amelia for making such a smart match, Mom and Dad were ecstatic, and turned their eager eyes right on me. One evening over dinner, Dad stated, "Now, Eliza, it's your turn to find someone suitable," his voice suggesting that my time was running short. Mom nodded fervently, already organizing my life as though it were another one of her perfectly kept house projects. "Consider your future, sweetheart. Someone who will be able to support you and is in good standing." I recall staring at my plate and feeling the walls get near. Mom painstakingly organized Amelia's wedding to highlight her ideal view of family reputation. Mom visited Amelia frequently after the wedding, giving advice and making sure her life unfolded precisely as she had planned. Seeing this, I knew one thing for sure. I did not want someone else to define my existence. One day, immersed in contemplation about how to flee the life my parents had scheduled for me, I was walking down the street when I heard the low hum of a motorcycle approaching. Curiosity drew me toward the sound, and it was there I spotted him. Pulling up next to me, Jake wore a leather jacket and had a casual smile. "You look like you need a ride," he said across the engine's noise, a light-hearted glitter in his eyes. I stopped, looking back at the road home, and then at his outstretched hand. What would I have to give up? "Sure, why not?" I said, sounding a mixture of anxiety and enthusiasm. Rising onto the rear of his bike, I experienced an adrenaline surge as we raced away. The wind whirled through my hair, and I laughed. First in a long time. Laughing, really. Jake yelled something about showing me his universe, and I tightened myself, not wanting this moment to pass. We stopped at a diner open to blue-collar workers and bikers. Over burgers and fries, Jake spoke to me about his life as a welder, his love of the wide road, and his passion for motorcycling. Raw and honest, It was all quite different from anything I knew. My voice barely above the clatter of plates and conversation. "Don't you get scared living like this?" I questioned. His eyes sparkled with every syllable as he said, "Scared? No, it's thrilling. You never know what's around the corner. Isn't that better than having everything planned out for you?" We met subtly over the next several weeks. Every ride on Jake's motorcycle took me closer to the life I wanted, and farther from the one I was meant to live. The speed and the experience went beyond mere excitement. It was about experiencing life, about freedom. One evening, as we watched the sun set from a remote vantage point, Jake turned to me. "Eliza, I ride to feel alive, to make every moment count. With you, every moment feels like it's worth something." My heart pounding, I leaned in toward him. "I never felt like this before. You make me free, Jake." He grinned and drew me in. "Then let us live, not return to just existing." 6 months with Jake seemed like a lifetime of memories I had always dreamed about. Under the stars, with the soft hum of his bike in the background, the day he proposed set my heart ablaze with yes before my voice could form the word. Except for one towering obstacle, my parents. It was wonderful. I battled my anxiety about bringing Jake before them. His frenetic energy, humble but fulfilled existence as a welder, and sharp edges were exactly what they hated. But love gave me the confidence to decide it was time they knew. Jake was dressed as usual, that of a leather vest, black t-shirt, tattered trousers, and a bandana. That day, I took him home. About him, I appreciated that he was unreservedly unique. As we made our way up the driveway, I felt the weight of my parents' opinion already. Mom's face became white as soon as we entered upon Jake, her voice just a whisper. She gasped, "What in the world, Eliza?" Dad responded harsher, his words like blades. "Who is this? And why is he in our house looking like a hooligan?" I inhaled deeply to help me to relax. "Mom, Dad, this is Jake. He is the man I love. We are getting married." Their hush was almost deafening. Then Dad turned to Jake, his voice full of contempt. "Married? What are your qualifications, young man? What do you do for a living?" Jake, bless him, he never wavered. "I'm a welder. I worked hard, took some specialized classes following high school, and earned an honest living." The expression on my parents' faces combined fear with incredulity. "Mom seems likely to pass out." "A welder, Eliza? You can't be serious." Dad's voice surged, rage blazing. "You expect us to bless this? To throw away your future for a welder?" I felt my will grow harder. "Yes, since he brings me pleasure. Isn't that what should matter?" Mom said, her voice shaky. "But the life you'll lead will be the life I choose," I shot back, my own voice gathering power. Dad shook his head, his choice obvious. "We cannot and will not support this. Should you choose him, do not expect to be a member of this family." Though not his decision, the finality in his voice devastated my heart. Squeezing my hand, Jake gave me the will to face them. "Then I pick Jake. I pick us. I pick my happiness." Dad's jaw tightened as Mom started to cry. His voice icy, he continued, "If you walk out with him, don't bother coming back." My heart was a jumble of feelings as I left my parents' house with Jake. Sadness, relief, excitement, and anxiety all blended together. The night air felt different, as every breath I took seemed to be a step toward a different life. For some time, we rode in quiet, the only sound the motorbike under us producing a constant roar. Jake looked to me, his countenance solemn, when we at last arrived at a little diner on the outskirts of town. His eyes sought any sign of uncertainty as he said, "You sure about this, Eliza? I mean, really sure? There's no going back after tonight." I nodded and firmly squeezed his hand. "I have never been more sure of anything. Being with you feels right. It feels like what I am supposed to do." He grinned that careless, seductive smile that had captured me on our first day together. "All right then, let's do it. Let's start our life together." We came upon a peaceful booth in the corner of the diner. The waitress delivered 2 coffees without asking, and we sat there organizing our next actions. Stirring cream into my coffee, I inquired, "So, what's first?" and watched it swirl and mix. With a pragmatic but hopeful tone, "We'll need to find a place to stay, at least for a while. Then maybe look for jobs." "I have some buddies who can help us get started," Jake said. "It's going to be tough, isn't it?" I remarked, more of a statement than a question. What we were doing started to sink in reality. Reaching across the table, Jake covered my hand. "It might be, but we'll handle it together." Tough is nothing new for either of us, right? I laughed. A brief, sharp surge of real pleasure. Right. Together. We were in the diner for hours planning and chatting. Every so often, Jake would toss out a notion that sounded so wild, so free, that my heart would leap. And maybe one day, just you, me, and the open road will have enough saved for that road trip across the country, I answered, letting myself dream more broadly than I had ever dared. I like that. Riding back into the city, we started looking. The next several weeks passed as a haze of activity. Though nothing extravagant, the modest apartment we came onto on the outskirts of town was ours. I picked up shifts at a nearby diner, while Jake worked at a neighborhood mechanic. Though life was difficult, it was ours. We made do with what we had. Every night when we returned home to see one another, it felt as though we had everything. We decided it was time to formally get married, in a little private ceremony, months later. I clung to a sliver of hope that my family would show up, that they would realize how content I was and let their preconceptions go. The chairs set aside for them stayed empty, though, and no congrats arrived. The day was lovely as it was ours, even with the ache of their absence. I got rather close to Jake's mother over time. She greeted me with wide arms, calling me her daughter and filling in for my own family. Her kindness and acceptance helped some of the hurt left over from my parents' rejection. For Jake and me, things were at last showing promise. His salary skyrocketed as he finished extra diving instruction and earned a certification as an underwater welder. That transformation made all the difference. We were able to purchase a townhouse in a decent neighborhood, the kind of place I had always fantasized about, but never would have guessed I would really live in. I started with Jake's company as a dispatcher. It was more than simply work. It felt like I was helping the man I loved and laying groundwork for our future together. On weekends, we rode his bike out of the city, screaming across twisting paths and savoring amazing vistas of the countryside. Those times were sheer delight, that of the breeze in my hair and his warmth against my back. Life had found a nice beat. Living close, my mother-in-law started visiting often, her presence a pleasant offset to the family I had lost. She showed up looking worried one afternoon when Jake was experimenting in the garage and I was pouring coffee. She replied, sitting down at the kitchen table, "There's been some ugly news. Something about a university professor engaged in a harassment scandal." My heart stopped momentarily. With a firm voice I asked, "Oh, did they say who it was?" Dreading the response. She gave her head a shake. "No, they didn't mention a name on the radio, but you know how these things go. By now it's most likely all over the TV." Nodding, I turned on the TV to catch the news. Indeed, there was a scandal report, and as I had predicted, my father's face showed up on the TV. The anchor went over the charges against him, and I had a frigid shock of incredulity. Turning off the TV, I sank down heavily to try to sort through the information. Wiping his hands with a rag, Jake stepped in and spotted my face. His face wrinkled with concern. He inquired, "What's wrong, darling?" I choked hard, my voice hardly audible. "It's my dad. He's been accused of stalking a pupil." Before Jake reached over and grabbed my hand, his face stiffened momentarily. "I'm sorry, Eliza. That's tough news. How do you want to handle this?" "Not really sure of anything right now." I shook my head. "I'm not sure. It's not like we're close anymore. What could I possibly do?" Understanding, he squeezed my hand. "Whatever you need, we don't have to figure it all out right now." I chose to hold out and watch things develop before acting. I knew I would have Jake by my side, whatever choice I took, so providing the comfort I needed to face whatever happened next, until that surprising afternoon at work, when a known automobile entered the parking lot, life was calm. Having not seen my parents in a long time, the sight of them set off a range of feelings I had put behind me. Both of them looked rather different. The crisis had worn on us. Mom looked years older and had dropped a lot of weight. Dad seemed broken, a shell of the strict man he used to be. My mother saw me and hurried over, arms extended, as though nothing had occurred, as though years of alienation and criticism could be healed in a matter of seconds. Not now, though. Could I embrace her? Rather, I retreated and grabbed Jake's hand, in search of fortitude in his presence. Mom exclaimed, her voice breaking with emotion, "Eliza, it was so hard to find you." Ever the austere one, Dad cut right to the point, his voice sharp and sour. "I went to your sister's husband for help, but that bloodsucker wanted a fortune. Your sister sided with him, and now they've kicked us out. We need your help. I was unfairly accused." Mom's voice was urgent. "Help." After all these years, you show up and demand help? We have nowhere else to go, I said, incredulity and wrath whirling inside me. They'd disowned us too. We thought maybe we could stay with you. I laughed almost at the ridiculousness. Stay with me? After you disowned me. You made it plain I wasn't your daughter anymore. Dad's old rage flared red on his face. You owe us, Eliza. After all we have done for you, I said. That's where you're wrong, feeling Jake squeeze my palm in encouragement. I choose my happiness over your demands. And now you want what? To just move in and pretend like we're a family. You threw me out. You owe nothing. The situation was spinning, and I could see people watching, a gathering starting to develop. Mom began to cry. Her tears were loud and more likely to draw attention. Through tears, "You're being unappreciative. After everything we've done for you," she said. I breathed deeply, my choice obvious. No, Mom, I'm free and happy. You made your choices, and now you have to live with them. I'm not unappreciative. I heard my dad screaming as we left, but Jake leaned over and softly ordered the security crew, "Don't let them come here again." Love and tranquility abound throughout the next months. They flew by. In our expanding family, a boy arrived to mark a fresh start. Never coming back were my parents. I saw them last that day in the parking lot, and even if part of me mourned for what might have been, I knew I had chosen the correct path for my family, and for me. Though it was not always simple, life with Jake was always true, always ours. Together we overcame obstacles, honored successes, and created a lifetime of love and fun. I discovered that happiness was about creating your own path, even if it meant leaving behind those who couldn't understand, not about following someone else's roadmap. Ultimately, that's also what really counted. Story 2. Life with Ryan was really pleasant, predictable. Our routines included his quiet snoring next to me every night, and our Sunday afternoon enjoyment of board games. One night, though, I saw him speaking on the phone with a woman called Clara, and everything changed. She was just a friend, he told me, but my intuition screamed differently. Deeper, I found a hidden world of debt, high-stakes poker games, a horrific Russian named Voronov, and a labyrinth of lies far beyond anything I could have imagined. Amanda is my name. This is the narrative of how my daily existence turned into a maelstrom of treachery, retribution, and the frantic struggle to salvage all I loved. Thursday night was like usual. Curled up on the couch, my cat Whiskers was quietly purring next to me, totally engrossed in the most recent episode of her preferred crime drama. The apartment was comfortable. The rain outside masked the city sounds. Then I heard it, Ryan's phone vibrating on the kitchen counter. Looking at the clock, I found it to be 2:37 a.m. By this hour, who calls? My gut turned around with an irresistible sensation. Ryan ignored the constant buzzing as he was showering, curiosity chewing at me. I went over to see the screen flash, unknown caller. I attempted to ignore it, but calls late at night started to happen often. Ryan would excuse himself each time, his face a mask of well-calibrated emotions. "Just an old friend catching up," he would remark. However, his voice lacked confidence. Someone else seemed to be replacing the assured, laid-back man I knew, edgy, silent. I discovered a small note folded in his jacket pocket one morning. "Meet me at the park, 8 p.m. Not a name or an explanation. Although the anxiety was terrible, I knew I could not ignore it anymore. I had to learn. Hoping to find one of their talks, I borrowed a voice-activated recorder from a tech-savvy acquaintance and concealed it beneath our bed, a mix of anxiety and resolve. Days stretched into weeks, and at last on a Tuesday night's wetness the recorder caught anything. Ryan's desperation-filled voice. "I have to stop doing this, Clara. Not right. My spouse is her. She is not deserving of this." Cold and alien, a woman's voice answered, "You owe me, Ryan. Note that. Either you carry on, or things may get quite unpleasant." My blood chilly. This woman seemed to be who? To whom did Ryan owe? The questions whirled in my head, stoking a fierce demand for responses. Nowadays, revenge was a basic instinct, rather than only a passing idea. Though initially I required a strategy, I was ready to fight fire with fire. Overburdened with questions, I looked to Mark and Jenny, my closest pals. There were my confidants, my rocks. Their responses reflected my own. Shock, incredulity, fury. I played them the recording. Jenny said, her eyes burning with will, "We're going to find out who this woman is." The tech guru in our group, Mark, advised following the unidentified calls. A few clicks and codes later, we had a lead. The calls came from a little, unremarkable coffee shop downtown. Shown in casual attire, we positioned the cafe. Hours passed, devoid of our mysterious woman. She entered as I was about to give up, unquestionably confident. Raven hair, stunning green eyes. She was staring at her phone, waiting for someone anxiously. My heart missed a beat as the door opened once more. Ryan had it. Though their talk was quiet, there was obvious conflict between them. I had to hear their words. Quickly thinking, I reported a fictitious gas leak by phoning the cafe. Everyone fled, including Ryan and the mysterious woman. Panic followed. Jenny, accidentally, spilled her coffee on the woman as they hurried out, diverting me to slide another voice recorder into Ryan's coat pocket. We listened to the tape later in Jenny's flat, our dread rising with every hushed syllable. Ryan replied, his voice almost above a whisper, "She's getting suspicious." "You think I care?" the woman answered angrily. "You know what you have to do." Ryan spoke with shaky voice. "This is not about money now, is it? It speaks to control." She chuckled, a cold sound that made my spine shiver. "You're not in position to challenge Ryan." Sitting there, stunned with shock and treachery, I benevolent, but a strong will was developing under the hurt. I would face Ryan, but only once I understood who this woman was and what she wanted. Mark had an amazing revelation as the evening progressed. The woman was Clara, a name that brought terrible recollections from our college years to surface. Ryan's former lover, noted for her manipulative skills and track record of broken hearts. However, why was she back? And what had she kept over Ryan? Then and there, I realized Clara had chosen the incorrect woman to meddle with. Now, revenge was a strategy in motion, rather than merely a concept. Memories of Clara washed back that evening. The lavish celebrations, the chain of broken menaces, the whispers of dubious activity. I assumed she had disappeared permanently from our lives. "We'll get through this, Amanda," Jenny replied, stroking my hand. "No matter what she's planning." We returned to the coffee shop the following morning, resolved to learn about Clara's present life. Mark had hacked into her social media account since he was so adept at finding anything online. One struck my eye as we turned over images. Clara in an upscale casino surrounded by guys fit for a criminal film. Mark said, pointing to a man next to Clara, "That's it," softly. "One of the most hated mobsters in the city, Dmitry Voronov." The bits were beginning to line up. Clara associated with some quite harmful characters, but Ryan fit into all of this. How? We arrived at the casino from my unrelenting search for solutions. It was lavish, gold and chandelier-drenched, the air heavy with expectation and chip clinking. She was there, Clara, seated beside Voronov at a high-stakes poker table. I would have come ready. A wig, some clothes, change of course. I looked nothing like you. Breathing deeply, I went to sit at the table and requested to play the game. Clara didn't know me, surprisingly. I sensed Clara's irritation mounting as the game went on. She hardly liked it one bit. I was winning. Levers in, and said, "You might be used to having control, Clara, but not tonight." Her eyes opened with understanding. I grabbed an envelope before she could respond. Inside pictures of her with Voronov, proof of their illegal activity. She snipped. "What do you want?" My voice steady. "Leave my husband alone. You think this is about Ryan?" She laughed. "This is more than your little love narrative calls for." I said, "Tell me everything, then, or these go to the police." She groaned, defeated. "Fine. Ryan owe me. I helped him out financially years ago. Today, I depend on him to pay back. Voronov is my policy. But believe me, Ryan will be free once I have what I desire." I was shocked. "This addressed money? How much?" She said, $50,000. Having been listening in, Mark said, "Looks like you're having a horrible night, Clara. Suppose we reach a deal." And suddenly a fresh strategy was developed. A poker game with greatest possible stakes. Our high-stakes game attracted a gathering as the evening wore on. At the casino, Clara was a force to be reckoned with her stinging intelligence and commanding stare. She looked shook tonight, though. Her confidence appeared to flutter every time she turned to face me. Was there more? Or was this really only about the money? Amanda murmured. "You're playing with fire." After a break. "Sometimes," I said, looking at her, "fire is the only way to cleanse." Ever the tech whirl, Mark had constructed a covert game live broadcast. Now enthralled by the developing drama, thousands were viewing online, presenting it as the game to save a marriage. He would also create a crowdsourcing page. Contributions began to stream in town. Hours passed. The pot expanded ever more broadly. Clara was losing. The weight was starting to affect her. At last, in a theatrical last hand, I will win. It was about reclaiming power rather than only about the money. Clara seemed to be losing, and for a brief instant I felt almost guilty for her. Then I considered the suffering and anarchy she had inflicted into my life. "You done it, Amanda!" Jenny cried out, her eyes gleaming. "We did it," I amended, and drew her into a hug. With a sizable leftover, we had more than enough to pay Ryan's loan off. Seeking to stop others from becoming victims of fraudsters like Clara, I chose to donate it to an organization helping victims of frauds. Nonetheless, our triumph was fleeting. Voronov was something we had undervalued. He was not going to let us leave that readily. 2 days later, as I was leaving the office, a black automobile drew up next to me. The window pulled down to show Voronov's steely, frigid gaze. He muttered, "You may have won the game, Mrs. Ryan. Then, you haven't won the war." Chills raced down my spine. "Pay back every penny," he said. "Your dear husband will pay the price otherwise." Anxiety shot through me. This had developed much beyond mere debt. Now it was personal, and Voronov was obviously a guy with resentment. That evening, my brain ran wild. Although going to the police looked like the clear decision, would they be able to guard us from someone as strong as Voronov? Ryan had got us into what? A plan started to develop as I laid in bed. If we were leaving this behind, we had to be strategic and employ the element of surprise. Inside me, a spark of rebellion started. I would not let this man to harass us. The following day, I called Clara. She was the only one who really grasped the world we were living in. Despite all, she agreed to help, unexpectedly. "Voronov undervalued you, Amanda," she murmured, sparkle of respect in her eyes. "But he won't repeat the same error twice. We have to be clever about this." Working together, we developed a strategy. Though it was dangerous, almost crazy, that was our only chance. A few days later, Clara and I entered the casino. The air smelled strongly of desperation and greed. Voronov's thugs tracked our every action to make sure we never tried anything stupid. Voronov sneered, his ugly gold suit almost screaming. "Mobster? Welcome back, Mrs. Ryan." He waved at the poker table. Stakes, enough money to clear his debt, and his life. Clara had been tutoring me. She had practically grown up in subterranean poker dens. Nothing, though, could really equip me for a game in which my husband's life hung precariously. Eyes flicked across the table. Cards were dealt. Chips were hurled. My heart hammering in my chest, I said to myself, "Stay calm." Hours stretched into a tense, terrible eternity. Bluffs were called, hands were won and lost, and gradually the chip pile in front of me started to expand. Voronov's arrogant smirk wavered with every hand I won, then turned to a building wrath. From the sidelines, Clara nodded gently to me. At last, the last hand turned up. I had queens in both pairs. Voronov raised the stakes to attempt to scare me into folding, so the betting ran around the table. Still, I noticed the shortest flutter of uncertainty in his gaze. He was playing bluffs. I drove every chip toward the table's center. All in, the chamber stilled itself. Voronov snorted. "You think you might defeat me with just a pair of queens?" He spread his cards. A pair of tens. The room gasped as lively conversation sprang forth. The mountain of money in the middle of the table pushed itself toward me. Furious and embarrassed, Voronov bolted, his goons following him. Clara and I hurried to the dark cellar Ryan was being kept in. He was freed, beaten, but alive, his obligation gone. The weight of what we had done at last struck me as we headed home. Ryan wept, sorry for dragging us into such misery, and our improbable rescuer turned out to be Clara, the woman purportedly just a friend. Ryan's original debt resulted from her tipping him off about Voronov's poker tells. She hadn't seen things getting this far, but it was a convoluted scheme to exact retribution on Voronov for a past grudge. I needed time to rebuild trust, and Ryan needed time to heal. And although Clara's actions inadvertently put us in risk, she also helped us to get out of it. We split amicably, her returning to the poker circuit, intending to utilize her gains to expose more dishonest players like Voronov. Though life gradually restored to some degree of normalcy, one developed a fresh respect for the small pleasures. Late-night cuddles took the place of late-night phone calls, and I was overjoyed. We began going to therapy, alone as well as together. Using our profits as seed money, we created a little cafe called Clara's, in honor of the woman who had transformed our lives in more than one sense. Regarding Voronov, there were speculations that he had left the nation, his reputation damaged. Every now and then, though, I find myself staring over my shoulder in case, in a game with great stakes, you can never be overly cautious. The ordeal had tried us and stretched us to our capacity. It had also shown, though, a strength and resiliency we were unaware we possessed. And ultimately we came out stronger, smarter, and more united than we had ever been.